is always. So as we know, there's a lot of webinars and virtual events going on every day. So we're going to record this and make this available to our people on our website, and also send it out to everybody on this call. And also through Echo is our goal, is to send it out through them, as we see a lot of people end up watching these later. So just wanted to let everybody know that. If you do have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box. Katie's going to be helping out monitor that. And I'm going to go ahead and launch a little PowerPoint that we've got put together as just an overview and some things to talk about of how to prepare your budget and what things to consider when you are planning your budget from a landscape contractor's perspective, but mainly geared towards the customer, HOAs, municipalities, anybody who has irrigation systems and wants to prepare for the following year. It's really important to build a budget and have that in mind when you're looking at the next year's overall budget for your property. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me make sure I share my screen here and get the right one shared. That's always the fun part, is figuring that out. But yeah, let's go. Okay. All right. Let's see if we can get this going. Well, that's not the right screen, is it? You guys are seeing the other screen. There we go. All right, how's that look?
Looks like K&D.
Perfect. All right, so these are kind of the objectives for the day. We're going to be discussing the current drought situation and the infrastructure of your system. What does it look like right now? What do you need to keep in mind planning ahead? And then we're going to be providing some insight into what that is right now. You kind of heard from our water district representatives of how they're seeing things in the world with the new mandate, with a little bit of rain, still a long ways to go to get out of the drought. They're going to talk a little bit about their rebates. We're going to touch on them briefly overall, but then we're going to give the floor back to our water reps and talk about what their districts specifically have, and also how to strategically prepare your budget to get those infrastructure upgrades taken care of and have a game plan in place moving forward. We're going to share a little information about technology and some of the tools that we use with our clients and amongst our company to increase your system's efficiency, which in the long term is going to help you save money, reduce your water use, save the planet, save money. That's what it's all about here. And then we're going to recap and kind of just open the floor up for questions and answers. And we got a few people on the call today that I think could share some good insight. Just kind of a touch on where we're at right now. We are in the driest months we've had in 100 years. Even our last winter in January, February, and March had the least rain and snow on record for any months in California in the last 100 years. So, I mean, that's a very significant stat. We're hoping, fingers crossed, this winter is different, but we got to be prepared in case we get more of the same. And that drought is becoming more of the new norm. And a good winter with lots of rain is becoming the rarity, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about how to prepare for that, what you need to keep in mind for moving forward into the future, and what that really entails. So just a kind of reminder of where we're at today. Non-functional turf watering ban is still in place. Most places you cannot water between 6 p.m. and 9 a.m. You're only allowed to water a couple days per week, depending on where you live. That could change. Maybe it's 1 day, maybe it's 2. I know the districts on here today have a little bit different rules on those, depending on your situation. You know, we got Paul Lord down in Marina. That is a completely different climate and different watering techniques compared to Roy Sykes with the SoCal Creek water districts. Even though we're 30 minutes apart, those different microclimates are substantially different. So we got to keep that in mind, and they're going to have different rules respectively. Irrigation runoff water is prohibited and definitely a problem of a huge waste of water. Also, watering within 48 hours of a rain event is also prohibited, and another huge waste of water that we're utilizing smart controllers and web-based controllers to make sure we stay ahead of that and are compliant with that. And that's a big factor right now, is getting the right components on the sites. All right, so kind of getting into the big topics of today is, what do I need to prepare my budget? So if you're a business owner, a member of an HOA board, facilities manager, anybody that's a part of this process of managing the financial aspect, but also the exterior aspect of your property, these are all things that we really recommend you consider and look into. And we're going to kind of touch on each one of these and expand on them as we go here. But kind of just an overall view of what we want to be thinking about right now is, how efficient is your system? How old are your irrigation components, which typically go hand in hand on efficiency, right? The newer technology, the newer components you have, typically the more efficient your system's going to be. And really looking at that as a whole. Kind of in line with that is your controllers. Are they up to date? Are they being used as efficient as possible? Just having them connected to the internet and being able to remotely control them is a huge game changer and can really help you get to that next level of being efficient. And then, what is a long-term goal? You know, we really encourage people to come up with a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year game plan of, what does that look like to take my irrigation system that was installed in the 70s to get it up to the 2022 level that we're at, and 2023 as we go into that new year. You know, what is that 1, 3, 5 year plan? As we understand and we know that it can be challenging to make huge changes right away, but what does that 1, 3, 5 year picture look like, and how are we going to get there to make the system efficient? Hand that with that is the ROI, right? So what does that return on investment look like? How are you going to convince the board, or how are you going to work with your landscape contractor or water management contractor to really show what that ROI could look like? The water districts have shown us what their 5 year plan looks like as far as the rate increases. And then there's a whole nother sector of that is the emergency drought and severe water conservation rates that they may have to implement if our water situation continues to get worse. So we're talking not only a steady increase over the years, but if we go into those emergency tiers, then we're talking, double or triple the amounts that we're normally used to paying. And that will really hurt if you're not prepared for it. Another thing that we like to recommend to consider is, how much money did you spend on repairs last year alone? That's a separate thing in the budget that we like to prepare our clients for, is what are the repairs going to be? Obviously, that's really hard to anticipate, right? However, it's really good to have that in there as a facilities manager, a board member, a property owner, to be ready and expect to have some money set aside for repairs, and then have a separate line item for upgrades. That's really what we work with our clients on and encourage. If it's a new system, that may fluctuate. Maybe you just have one line item for repairs, right? But most of our systems that we're encountering are anywhere from 5, 10, most of them are 20 years or older. And we really need to have a good plan around the upgrades and the repairs as separate functions. So those are kind of the big topics that I think we are going to be covering today and looking at. So just starting with system efficiency, we see here a picture that we've used before that I thought is a great representation of a system that looks okay at first glance to the regular person here. But as we really inspect it, we see that there's a lot of misting, which means that the pressure probably is high. Some of the heads are tilted. Some of the sprinklers are tilted. Some of them are turned away from the lawn and spraying the tree. And I don't think that's intentional. I think that sprinkler is worn out. And as the sprinklers pop up and down throughout years and years of use, those seals start to wear out. And so instead of popping up and spraying the lawn, this one's popping up and turning and spraying the trees. So one of those questions that we get a lot is, how can I tell if my system is efficient? What are signs to look for? And that's where these are perfect signs to look for right here. We've got a lot of water on the sidewalk. We've got a lot of misting to where it looks like the water is just floating away into the space and into the air. And we're also looking for sprinklers that may be tilted. You know, sometimes if you turn your sprinklers off or you come out the next morning and you see them stuck up, that's because they're worn out and they're not doing their job properly anymore and they need to be replaced. So one of the things we recommend is getting an assessment or an audit done. There's a couple of different terms people use these days, but there's a lot of good opportunities to turn every zone on, check out what's going on with that zone by a professional eye, and give an assessment and kind of an inspection on your system. And I know that's something that we do at K&D, but a lot of contractors do that. And it's a great way to kind of get an idea of where your efficiency is and how efficient your system is.
Hey, Shane, can I ask a question about that last slide?
Yeah, definitely.
Of course, it's hard to see the full picture, but it kind of looks like to the left, maybe they don't need the turf. Maybe that's just mulched and drip irrigation. And then to the right, they keep the turf grass. Is that the sort of recommendations you might be making to customers?
Absolutely. That is definitely something that we will recommend in areas that we see can be converted. You know, that all goes back into that budget process as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're actually coming up with different line items for turf conversions, you know, irrigation upgrades to your system. And sometimes those go hand in hand, right? So if there's an area that really is not functioning as a usable space that is currently turf, or maybe even, you know, an old planting area that could be changed out to a permeable surface or a dry creek bed or new planting with mulch and drip, we're making those recommendations hand in hand and suggesting to the clients, you know, this is a great area here to budget for next year. And maybe that's in the 3-year picture if you don't want to do it in year 1. But that is something that we're trying to recognize and identify with our clients and with people in the community, is really looking at what is the best area and what is the best application for your landscape in these areas to really make the most functional, but also be water smart and conserving as much water as possible. So that's a great point, Michael. I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's a great recognition of an area that could be converted and really is not a great use of turf there. So kind of talking about system uniformity and what that is, right? So the way that we define that is really the coverage of your system, and is everything getting equal amounts of water. That's, to kind of sum it up, is a very brief overview of what that is. So let's see here. There we go. So system uniformity is really a measurement of how evenly water is applied over the landscaped area, and really is one of the most critical factors of determining the efficiency of your system. So that's kind of what we like to call system uniformity in the landscape world. This is kind of a really good, just inside of, on a broad view of simplistic view of what that looks like. You know, we've got our 4 plants on the left are getting plenty of water, but our 2 plants there in the middle are starting to die because they're not getting enough. And the one on the right is getting just about what it needs. So when you have poor uniformity, you're having to overwater to get those 2 plants in the middle enough to survive, when in reality, you're probably overwatering other plants. So just a very general view of what that's looking like and what we're talking about there with system uniformity and how important it is to have an equal application of your irrigation to your plants and to your lawns, if you do have them. Here's another kind of example of what that looks like and how that can really be seen in real life here. Is if we have low uniformity, the areas in the middle are going to be stressed out and not look too great, while the areas down here in the gullies and on the edges are looking pretty good. But now we've got a stressed out area because our system is not very efficient. So right now, that's probably more what you're seeing, right? Is the dryness and having to reduce water. You're seeing those areas that are probably not as uniform of getting water start to stress out and dry. And you're seeing other areas that are still looking okay. So how can we get those areas all to be even and have equal amounts of water? That's where those upgrades really come into play. And that's where it's really important to inspect your system often to identify these areas and identify where there's room for improvement and what is it going to take to make those adjustments and make those improvements. So here's another example that I'm sure people have seen that's really poor system uniformity and what we like to call distribution uniformity, DU. This is a really good example of a pressure issue. From what I can tell, most likely is that there's not enough pressure for the sprinkler to operate properly. So you're getting the sprinkler popping up and irrigating just a small area around it with a lot of water in those areas. But because of whatever issue's happening, it's not able to function as it properly would and hit every single square foot of that area evenly, which a lot of the rotors and high efficiency sprinklers these days can do if the components and if the pressure and all of those variables are working properly. Here's another example of something we've probably all seen is really high pressure. And when we have high pressure, you see all the runoff that's happening onto the street, but also that's misting into the air because of that high pressure, way more than these sprinklers are built for, and probably putting out 3 times the amount of water as we need, but also as the plants really want. So this is a good picture that we've been using to kind of show that example of when you really have high pressure, what does that look like and how can that affect your landscape? Like I said, you're probably using 3 times as much water here as you really need to because of that loss efficiency. So another thing we talk about is precipitation rates. So precipitation rates are really how much water is being applied from your irrigation system to your landscape. So spray heads, like we just looked at, those have the highest precipitation rates traditionally. And as you get into rotors and bigger sprinklers, obviously those are going to have a higher level as well, but they're watered a much larger area. So really understanding your precipitation rate and matching that with your landscape's needs is really important. So really the soil infiltration rate matched the precipitation rate is where we find that balance. If you have a clay soil that doesn't absorb water very well, then you really want to have an irrigation system that has a low precipitation rate so that you can slowly water that area to give that ground enough of a chance to absorb that water. And that's where we like to use drip irrigation in those situations, or MP rotators, which is a high efficiency nozzle that really has a good job of distributing the water evenly, but at a slow rate so that the water has a chance to get absorbed by the soil. So knowing your soil type and your precipitation rate is going to help you identify the best components for your system. So we like to measure those rates by how fast that is going into the ground in inches per hour. So one of those assessments that we do, we check the soil and see what type of composition that is, and then we'll turn on the system and try to see if that's a good match. And we're looking to make sure that that soil can absorb the water at a proper rate. And if it's a clay soil or a sandy soil, we're making adjustments to not only the scheduling, but maybe suggesting changing components to better match that soil infiltration rate with a component that has the proper precipitation rate. And that's something that a good contractor will help you with and be able to recognize and identify for you is what does that really mean? And for my site, what is the best application? What are the best components for me? So this is something too that I wanted to touch on. Michael and Roy were talking about it, and Paul earlier, right? We have our months here, and what a lot of people will do is they'll turn their controller on, February, March, April, whenever the rains stop. They'll set it up for 3 days a week for 10 minutes and have the shrubs be on a different program for, 3 or 4 days a week and 45 minutes for drip. And then they'll leave it alone and they won't touch it until, oh, it's going to rain, let's turn it off. And that is a really old school approach that we're really trying to educate people on And this is one of my favorite slides that kind of shows that, of if you do have a weather-based smart controller or even a web-based controller that you can control remotely, you can see that a weather-based system is going to adjust up to and down to the peak levels throughout the summer, only really watering what you truly need. And this is going to change year to year, but this is just an overview of the benefits of having a weather-based watering system and utilizing the functions of a smart controller. And you can see the curve here as it goes up and down and falls off as we're approaching September, October. You know, we should be down in that 50% range or less, depending on where you are and what your climate is, right? And that's kind of what Paul and Michael were talking about in Marina. You know, we may be able to go 30 to 40%. And in Watsonville, maybe we do need to be a little bit higher up on that. Maybe we need to be at 50% right now. It's one of those things where you really got to pay attention and look at the current factors of the weather, the ET, and your landscape to make sure that we are adjusting these things appropriately. Here's a similar slide that kind of shows that as well, and how you can reduce it from the peak of June and July typically all the way down to October and beyond that. And typically we're turning the clocks off in October, or shortly after that is ideal, but we should be down to 50% or way less by October. So there's a little bit of changes of what this looks like for the average situation, but this is kind of an overview of what that can look like. So here's a project that we did down in the Marina, Monterey area that used to be all lawn that was converted to trees and shrubs and all drip. This entire side is drip irrigation. And I think there's bubblers for the trees. But other than that, it's all drip, and the water savings on this is just astronomical. I mean, we're probably using 15 to 20% of the irrigation compared to the previous application of the lawns with sprinklers. I mean, that's 80 to 70, 75 to 80% savings we're seeing just by converting things. Yes, there's an initial investment into those upgrades, but that return on investment over time with the water rates and with the direction of everything that's going on right now and your property's value as an asset to you, I mean, that alone is a substantial return. Getting into smart controllers, this is really important to look at your controller, talk to your contractor, look at how old they are. Are they web-based? Can you program them from your computer or from your phone to make those quick adjustments? Are they utilizing the weather-based features and weather sensors if you have them? Are they using the historical data that a lot of these controllers have? Are we using those aspects to their fullest advantage? And if not, are we making sure we're keeping a handle on it ourselves to adjust them accordingly? I know with the fog in Watsonville area, sometimes that can trip a rain sensor, and then it'll get 80 degrees in the day and your system doesn't water for 4 days in a row because it got rain in the morning, but it was really just fog. So it's something to really utilize the technology, but we really encourage not to rely 100% on that because of that exact reason. There may be weird things that go on and have microclimates in your site that your sensors are going to adjust to, but it may not be an even application across the board, but it is a huge advantage and a great feature that can really help us with monitoring and using our water the most responsibly.
Hey, Shane, can I ask a quick question?
Definitely.
On that, the slide of the new landscape you installed, do you also anticipate lower maintenance costs, maybe because now you're not mowing? And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting topic that we have come across. And what we have found is that initially it is a little bit less maintenance to mow those areas because a lot of the teams that we have, they can mow lawns and get that stuff done quick, right? However, as those plants get established, there's still a lot of natural pruning that goes on. And also what we've seen too is the weed control and the weed management is a pretty time consuming factor as those plants get established, that during that establishment period, we really try to keep a handle on that. So we like to talk to our clients about, maybe it is going to be a little less maintenance initially. However, as those plants get established and we have to trim them back and keep them pruned, keep the pests off of them, right? We got IPM to deal with. That the maintenance factor still ends up being pretty similar from what we've experienced, but that's all something that you really have to look at with your client, with your contractor, and come to a conclusion that everyone feels good about of, is the time really needing to be adjusted, or are we just shifting our resources into a different direction and having more high-end skilled pruning and maintenance techniques that may be different than the mow and blow edging factors? How are those times really associated with the entire project, and where are those resources being shifted and maybe adjusted to where, yeah, we were able to mow in the X amount of hours, but now that we're having to spray and keep a handle on the pests and take care of the weeds and do that natural pruning, at the end of the day, are we really saving that much time? So that's something that we've definitely included and talked about with our customers and our clients and ran into. And a lot of times, we will go into a trial period and kind of talk about, what does that look like? Let's try it out. Do we need to reduce time, or are we spending our time in other areas now that still is equating to similar of what we were doing before? So does that answer your question, Michael?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, next thing we want to talk about is sub-meters. So this is another great feature that we've actually implemented on a couple of our sites recently. If you have ponds or pools or hot tubs or fountains, water features that are connected to your irrigation system, it's hard to really tell if you have a leak on a sprinkler zone or a valve, or is it the pond or the fountain that's leaking? That's something we've ran into, and it's been really difficult to determine where is that leak, or what is using the majority of our water here. Is it our fountain? Is it our pond? Is that the best use of water? So one thing that we've implemented in some of our sites is installing these sub-meters. So these sub-meters go directly into the main line, and if your system has a fountain or a pond, you can put that sub-meter right in line with the entrance of the water for that feature. And then you can measure and really see exactly how much water is being used by that fountain, by that pond, by that water feature, and also put in a shutoff valve, which is what we recommend. And that way, let's say your water district calls you and says, hey, it looks like you have a continuous leak. We're seeing X amount of gallons per hour being used, and it's nonstop. And you're wondering, great, now where is this thing, right? And maybe there's not an obvious wet spot or not an obvious blowout of water, and it's a small leak. Well, having these sub-meters with the shutoff valve, isolation valve in front of them, now you can isolate that water feature or that pond and see exactly how much water is being used, but also you can shut it down, shut it off, and see if that leak stops. If that leak stops, then there's a pretty good chance somewhere after that shutoff valve and sub-meter, you may have a leak, and it may be a pond liner, it may be a break in the concrete if it's a water feature or fountain. It may be a number of different things, but this gives us visibility of how much water is being used by those features, and can we separate them out, isolate them, and see if it's cost effective to repair those, fix them, or do we need to demolish them and come up with a different solution for that area of the landscape. So that's kind of how we've been using sub-meters, and it's something that I think is a good thing to put into that budget. If you do have a pond or a water feature or a fountain or a jacuzzi or a pool that is tapped into your irrigation system, I would strongly recommend putting in a sub-meter to recognize that amount of water and really be able to control that aspect of your system. So then we talk about sensors. This is another great thing to build into the budget that, maybe you don't do right away, but maybe it's part of that 1, 3, or 5 year picture of getting it into the budget so that down the road you can install these features and help your system be more efficient and stay on top of your water loss. So ET sensors, weather sensors, there's a lot of different names for these. Hunter makes great ones. Weathermatic I know they have some too, and Rainbird as well. They have these ET and weather sensors that can be connected to your controller and help make adjustments in real time based on what's happening on your site specifically. And typically these are a pretty, cost-effective add-on, couple $100 for an add-on to your controller that can make a big difference and really help you be efficient with your watering. Flow sensors and master valves, that is a really great benefit as well. Those basically will help monitor your flow of your system and recognize when there's irregular flow, either too little or too much, and indicating that you may have a break. And depending on what controller you have and the flow sensor combination, you can actually pair those together, program it, and teach your controller that if there is a leak, it's actually going to shut that master valve down according to what the flow sensor is reading, and will prevent any future leaks and give you an alert that you can go send a technician out or go check it yourself to see what's going on, and then clear that once you fix it and have it operate normally again. So we put these in a lot of our sites. We're really encouraging this as well to be put into the budget. These can be a little bit more expensive depending on your system, the location, and where your point of connection is, and how many point of connections you might have. Those are all factors that will determine the cost of putting in a flow sensor and a master valve. We really like to recommend those as a pair, master valve and flow sensor. However, you can just do a flow sensor to monitor your flow. But if you have a flow sensor in there and it recognizes this huge flow and you don't see it till the next day, well, now all your water's already lost and it's kind of known about it after the fact. So a great sensor and a great tool. We just really recommend putting it in with the master valve and pairing that up with your controller properly to make sure that you are shutting down your system as quickly as possible when there's a leak. Soil moisture sensors, the technology there is, in my opinion, still developing and getting better and better. And you really have to make sure you have those in the correct places. Rain sensors, those are like I think Michael and Paul were saying, those are a really easy addition. They make wireless ones that if you don't have a web-based controller, even if you do, and you're out of town, you don't have service, or you're on vacation, you're the facilities manager, or you're a contractor, that rain sensor is that extra backup device that, if paired correctly and if connected properly, will shut your system off if there's a rain event. So that's a really good feature as well. Just to talk a little bit about rebates, a lot of the districts have them going on right now. Once I wrap this up, we're going to go briefly to each person and give them a chance to update us on where theirs are at. But a lot of them have smart controller rebates, sub-meter rebates, drip irrigation retrofit rebates per square foot, lawn removal rebates. We bid a project recently that was a $30,000 job with a $8,000 rebate available to the client. So now instead of paying $30,000 for the project, they're only paying $22,000. And so we're really working with our clients to take advantage of those rebates. And then we're actually working with the CLCA, California Landscape Contract Association, to lobby in Sacramento and really push our people in the legislature to improve and increase these rebates to really incentivize customers and clients to move forward with projects. And that will help build into the budget as well. If you have a lot of renovations that you want to do, and let's say it's $50,000 that you're thinking you're going to need to make for renovations and upgrades, having those rebates can help offset that and allow you to save a little bit of money or do a little bit more with that money that you do have set aside and really get the biggest bang for your buck. So learning about the rebates is a great feature and a great thing to do. And we're happy to help with that as well. Another thing we just wanted to touch on is drones and AI. You know, this is a evolving world we live in. Technology is improving and helping us get our jobs done more efficiently every day. And just to kind of tie it back into how we're using it in irrigation and water management, you know, we're starting to use drones to do site inspections and view our sites to help us determine what areas are dry, what areas do have bad distribution uniformity and are low efficiency, where are the opportunities for improvement, and be able to pinpoint and go after those specifically. Instead of walking a 3-acre site, you know, we could take these drones up and view those, and our technicians now have a very pointed direction of where they're going to check things out. And also kind of give us an overview of what the site looks like as a whole, and really just improve the efficiency of our teams, which in turn is money for our clients because we charge by the hour, right? If it takes us 6 hours to do an inspection, then we're charging the client for those 6 hours. If we can use technology and get through that inspection in 3 hours, then hey, we just saved our clients half of the money it's going to cost to do that inspection. So that's kind of an insight there of what we're doing and using technology for. Final thoughts. Are you ready for 2023? You know, we recommend, like I said, having a different line item for your repairs, which for us, what we recommend is, depending on the site and how old your system is, it could be 15 to 25% of your annual contract value. So if your annual contract value is $50,000, then that would be, you know, about $4,500 a month that you're paying for your service. We recommend budgeting about 15 to 25% of that. So, you know, let's just say it's 10% of 50,000 would be $5,000. Then you want to have a little bit more than that, 7,500 to 10,000 in repairs if your system is on the older side, right? And for infrastructure upgrades, that is really a site specific. It's really hard to give a general percentage that we would recommend for that, you know, but I think a safe bet on that too is anywhere from 10 to 20%, depending on the age of your system, right? But that's where we really encourage people to do those inspections, turn on every zone, have a professional go through your system and really identify what areas are inefficient, and then provide recommendations with pricing on what that looks like to repair those. And I know for our clients, we help them plan out that 1, 3, and 5 year picture of, you know, these are things that are really not good right now that need to be addressed. And then these are things that we think we can convert over time. If you don't want to spend the money right now, you know, let's look at that. And these 5 zones, for example, should be converted to drip. Let's do 2 this year, 2 next year, and 1 in the 3rd year. You know, having a game plan and being able to identify what specifically your site needs and then planning that out over a few years is really how we feel is going to be a good way to build that into your budget and plan ahead for those upgrades. You know, I really like to use the example of and the analogy of, you know, what kind of car did you drive 30 years ago? It's most likely not the same car you drive today. I know there's some people out there that are still driving that 1979 Volkswagen Bug, but a lot of people are upgrading because of the new safety features, the improved fuel mileage, the roll-up windows and doors and electric features of the seats, you know, side airbags, dual passenger airbags, you know, all of those great features that the car industry and the auto industry is upgraded, not to mention everything else in our lives, our phones, computers, tablets, I mean, everything, right, has continued to progress. But, you know, we haven't seen that in the irrigation industry. We're still seeing controllers that are 25, 30 years old. We're seeing sprinklers and valves that have been installed in the 70s, 80s, and now, you know, in the 90s even too, that are becoming obsolete and are really inefficient because of their age. Everything wears out over time, and irrigation components are no different. So
hey, Shane, I just came up with a new idea.
Yeah.
So I shared a $1 million idea with you last week. I have another one. Hey, you know that Mack tool truck you see driving around town?
Yep.
Maybe Ewing or someone should get some trucks
Right.
and put the equipment on the trucks and drive around and visit the landscapers.
Right. And then sell stuff to them right out of the trucks and have them put it on loan. I think that's what the Matco and those guys do is they, you know, here, we'll give you these tools and then you just sign up and pay us monthly. And then we can get it into your guys' industry there. That's a really good idea. I like that. Yeah, but I mean, those are all things to consider about when you're making your budgets, is really identifying what are those multi-year plans. And I know that there's a lot of, you know, manufacturers and the water districts, they have rebates, and manufacturers have finance plans and options for contractors to do these types of improvements and then pass those on to the customer. You know, we're throwing ideas around of, you know, how do we make this easier for our customers and our clients to make these upgrades and make these improvements? So we're looking at options around, you know, hey, you know, sign a multi-year contract with us. We'll build it into your monthly amount, and then we're going to put in a free controller for you. You know, those are all things that we're trying to do as a contractor to help make these improvements for our customers worthwhile, but also be able to handle it on the pocketbook and not fork over huge amounts of money up front. But that's where having that 1, 3, 5 year plan is really key to make sure you're planning ahead and not taking everything at once, but really breaking that up over a couple of years and improving your system throughout that process. And a lot of contractors will provide this budget for you. You know, if you ask K&E to give you a budget and do an inspection on your site and provide some recommendations, we're happy to do that. And that's a whole process that really does take a professional eye to do. And you really want to make sure you have people who know what they're doing when they're giving these recommendations. But, you know, we're showing customers what that ROI is, what our anticipated savings are with moving forward with our plans and our programs and offerings, and how that relates to saving water and ultimately saving our customers money, which is obviously the biggest driver for most people. But that's what's great about water conservation and water management to us, is not only are we able to save our customers money, but we're saving our natural resources of water. And I don't know if anybody's been paying attention to what's happening in other countries, but there are some other countries in the world that are in severe drought situations with having very little drinkable water for people. And we just saw a hurricane come through Tampa Bay, Florida. You know, they're trying to pull water off the hillsides out of pipes just to get drinking water. You know, and I really hope people start waking up and paying attention to this issue that we have. And pretty soon, it's not just going to be about money. It's going to be about surviving and keeping our landscapes alive and making sure that our environment and our communities don't go into a desert scape process where we don't have trees and beautiful plants and landscapes. I mean, that's where conserving water today is going to help protect our future. And that's really what we're all about here at K&D, and why we started our water management department. So that's pretty much all I have for our presentation. I hope I answered some questions and gave some insight about how to really prepare that budget. You know, we're happy to help people do that. There's a lot of other contractors that I know help and be a part of this. But really, I recommend turning to your contractor or a vendor that can help with this and do these assessments, do these inspections, and help you prepare and build those budgets for the next year and the next couple of years in the future. And
Thank you,
that,
Shane. Sorry, I have a siren in my background here. I do know that Jim does have sound. Jim, is there anything that you would like to add? Just a quick 5 minutes so sorry we couldn't get you up and running today.
Can you hear me okay, Katie?
Yes, we can. Thank
Great.
you.
Well, I apologize for all the I'm performing like a retired person. I beg your pardon. But one of the things that Shane mentioned that resonates with me, and I did a little look at the local water rates, that is Soquel Creek and City of Santa Cruz. And it just seemed like if we could move that distribution uniformity from the 50% that spray heads offer to 75%, which you'd see with rotating stream or precision sprays, that represents a savings of around $370 in 5 years. The cost of the nozzles for 1,000 square feet with that $370 savings are only about $70. So there's that $300 margin per 1,000 square feet that you have. That's at today's water rates. I don't know if you've noticed, but if you look at the 5-year projection for water rates, one of the water districts is going to have a 50% increase. So you have people complaining about fuel costs. It's all driven by that. And so when we conserve more, we put the water agencies in a bind. And now they don't have the revenue and they have to increase the rates, which I think, and Paul's kind of shaking his head, but I think that's the greatest thing that ever happens because people value us more. But we certainly have to engage, as Shane said, before the tipping point. And yesterday I went to New Melones Reservoir and I had a wonderful picture of their 26% capacity level. And that doesn't have any effect on Santa Cruz other than it's a driver and motivates people to think more seriously about how they're going to respond. Because next year, I mean, if we don't get the rain this winter, I hate to even talk about it. In Los Angeles, they've in many of the districts, they banned all landscape irrigation. Just said, shut it off. Now the enforcement, I don't know what they think they're doing with that, but the very idea that people are considering doing that is threatening to our industry and to our society. So if we don't think about what we might do in a progressive way as contractors, we're going to have a problem. So I applaud K&D and I apologize for my technology and that's my main thrust there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll share this. This is something that I did that worked with Katie on that kind of speaks to that point, Jim, is, this is just for what we projected for May at one of our sites. It's a very large site.
Yeah.
But this is the projections of what that could look like for moving to 2023. So, if we look at our May 2022 total gallons, and we see that was 2,211 units or 1.6 million gallons.
Wow.
That cost for the water is $30,000. And if we look into the second box down here of projected 2023, that 30,000 goes up to 33,717. And if we were to be into the emergency rates of those different tiers, now you're talking in 2022 in May, if we were in stage 1 emergency, we'd be at 32. If we were at stage 2, that 30,000 turns into 36,000. And if we're at stage 3 emergency, that 30,000 goes to 41,000. And just jumping up to stage 5 emergency rates, now you're literally doubling your cost of water for that month from $30,000 to $62,000. So, hopefully we don't go into these emergency rates, but, this is the reality of the situation. And I know our client, they wouldn't be able to afford this and they would be having to turn things off. And now we're talking about losing plant material, losing lawn, hopefully not, but possibly losing trees, depending on how severe this situation is. So this is just something that we put together as kind of
great.
A showing of exactly that point.
Well, Shane, I think in most water agencies in our area, once you get to stage 4 and 5, they're not going to be allowed to irrigate outdoors anyway.
Right. They're gonna come and turn your meter off is very possible, right? I know that's happened before. So yeah, that's definitely extreme, but it's something that we wanted to, it just really helps kind of show the visual of like how serious this is. And, if we do get these emergency rates, like Mara said, we may not be able to water at all. So,
And I think one of the things that people sort of lose in all this, they assume that if we can convert to drip irrigation, we're going to save water. And I just see drip irrigation as a different way to waste water if we're not careful. And one of the things, I did a little retrofit for an area where they weren't allowed to irrigate the turf grass. And we just ran some Netafim out, some drip line tubing, and ran a ring around the tree. What was an 80-foot tree. So we happened to run an 80-foot ring of 0.6 tubing, 12-inch spacing, that had an application rate of 0.08 of an inch an hour. That meant we had to water 12 hours a week. Well, no one's going to do that. They're going to water the hour, the 2 hours, the 3 hours, and say everything is fine, and the tree is going to start to struggle. And they just don't have a sense of how much water those valuable trees and shrubs need when they sort of shift out of the turf grass and into these ornamentals. I'm sure you observe it. I think it's problematic. They don't really know how much water to give them.
Yep. Well, we are just about out of time. I know we talked about the water districts kind of giving a brief showing of what their rebates look like. Paul, Roy, Michael, do you guys want to jump in and show that real quick and share with us, or any other thoughts you had?
Yeah, I can do it in 2 minutes.
All right, Michael, you're up. Go for it.
Okay. Okay, just a few images from last week. All right, so this is still going on. This is last week of Union Bank. These are all in Watsonville. My favorite, Home Depot. It's a Shell station in Watsonville and Freedom Boulevard. And then we've got Edward James Investment. This is in Eastlake. What really bothers me, though, is you see the people on the sidewalk. There's something you don't consider. It's like people have to navigate this. I've seen people walking in the street before trying to avoid getting wet from sprinklers. So like I said earlier, the city of Watsonville will be more aggressively enforcing the water use regulations as of September. The penalties will include a double of the consumption rate. Then after that, we go from $100 to $250 to $500 penalties. And if there's still a willful violation of the water use regulations, the water service will be terminated, and then the customer will have to pay some fees to have that service reinstated. What we've done to help customers is develop what we call an irrigation efficiency action plan. So this is for those customers who have entered some stage of the penalty phase. This is how they get out of the penalty phase. And it speaks to what you were talking about earlier, Shane, with having a plan, budgeting out for 3, 5, 10 years. So we give them a 3-year plan. We'll come out there and help them understand what they need to do to their irrigation system to for it to be code compliant. And we'll check in with them every 3 to 6 months. The customer must sign and agree to this process. So you have to sign on to the paperwork. We have something written to hold them accountable. And the customer can also utilize the city's rebate program to help offset the costs of these projects. And in Watsonville, we've set up the program so that a water customer can utilize the rebate once per year per account. Sometimes, larger commercial accounts might have multiple meters. And again, we understand it might take 1, 2, 3 or more years. So we allow these customers to come back and utilize that rebate more than just once. And there is the rebate we are offering currently. It's $1 per square foot for replacing high water use plants and sprinklers with low water use plants and low volume irrigation equipment. It's up to $1,000 for single family residential properties, up to $2,000 for multi-residential and commercial properties. Your eligible materials include low water use plants, permeable hardscape materials, mulch or compost, drip irrigation materials, and gray water materials, and no synthetic turf. And that's it.
Hey, Michael, I had a question.
Yeah.
Is that money for those projects? Is that set aside just for those projects in advance, or they can only apply for the rebate program and receive it if money is available?
If money's available, so we have to go to city council every year because the water department, it's part of the utilities department, so it's city owned. So every year, city staff has to go and have budget approved for this program.
So it's similar to our district, whereas if you don't plan it a year out in advance in your budgeting, you may not have the money available for their project if they just suddenly show up with a project, right?
Perhaps, but again, we get it approved once per year. So at least for that fiscal year, I always tell folks we have money for this fiscal year. I don't foresee any change in that, at least next year. Like I expect council to approve next year too, considering the situation we're in.
So I'll give a review of our budget right now for landscape incentives. So we did not plan for this non-functional turf ban when we budgeted this year. So we're already almost out of money, and we're not even halfway through, right? This week is the end of the month. So we only have 20% of our money remaining, and it's only in the thousands of dollars. It's not enough for large projects, unfortunately. So we tell the larger projects, the big commercial projects with lots of turf and stuff like that, just as we do for our toilet rebate program, come to us the year before and budget for these upgrades. In advance, we put in the request, and then in the springtime, the board will consider approving your project. And then the money's just saved, and it's there, it's available. You don't have to worry about it not being there once it's approved. It's saved for your project to be completed. So we always encourage the big customers to come forward and do it a year in advance. But right now, most of our money has been given out to the non-functional turf customers. It's amazing the response we've gotten. Taco Bell, McDonald's, some of the shopping center owners have all come forward requesting money, and we're able to help a lot of them out. The biggest upgrades and the requirements of our program is upgrades to the controllers as well. So when you take out your turf, we not only just consider the turf grass and the replacement with low water use plants, but we also look at the irrigation system, and we do require an upgrade to something more modern with weather-based controllers and automatic shutoffs. So that's the place we tell everyone to start. If you can't take out the turf this year, at least come to us about money for your irrigation upgrades. And then next year, we'll replace the golden grass. And that's about all I got.
Awesome.
All right, I think I'll take my 2 minutes here and just say, in answer to your question, Shane, are you ready for 2023, 2024, 2025? I think the answer is no from most of the landscapes that I see, and it speaks to how cheap water has been. Hopefully things will change, and but I don't think they will without price signal. So having said that, I would like to kind of show our little shining rebate menu here. I'll just, so spray to drip conversion, $20 per 100 square feet. Irrigation controller, if it's a weather-based, $600 per irrigated acre, $125 per residential timer. Rain shutoff switch, $25. Turf removal, $2 a square foot. We are fully funded. It's a $10,000 max for commercial properties. So we also have a sub-meter rebate, which I forgot to include, and nod to that on your presentation, Shane. Another thing that is in the offing is we're going to be looking at our new rate structure. We're at the end of a 5-year cycle, and something that's kind of intriguing is seasonal budgets. So that means water is more expensive in the summer than it is in the winter. So that would also send an additional price signal where needed to kind of flatten that curve. So that's under 2 minutes, I believe. And one more thing, Michael, beautification is great with the landscapes. I agree 100%. I think it's also insurance. And in order to break the barriers that sometimes HOAs, I think we're kind of focusing on that. We're seeing these 30 and 40-year systems because there've been barriers to either moving boards to make investments, to change their systems. And so what we're doing here, I think I want to make that point and use this time to drive that home, that breaking down those barriers is also the agencies, it's K&D, and it's the HOAs that we need to come to terms with and figure out strategies to deal with that. Rebates are good, but it might take a more nuanced approach. We're looking at those things, but this is what we have right now today. And I hope that we get some rain this winter. And that's my spiel.
Shane, can I ask Roy a quick question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Roy, the spray to drip conversion, would that apply to turf grass? If I had a spray system in turf grass and converted it to drip, would that qualify potentially?
It wouldn't, because the turf removal predicates the removal of overhead spray and conversion to drip. So they don't mix and match.
Okay. But if I have, and let me ask this question of all of you, I guess, if I have drip irrigation in turf grass, am I under a 2-day watering regimen, or do I have flexibility?
In the city of Watsonville, you have flexibility because we're only enforcing the 2 days for sprinklers.
Okay.
And for Soquel Creek, because of our urban water management plan and the stage that we're in, we do not have a weekly restriction. We just have time of day.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't
Thank
have a restriction in Marina as well.
Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome, everyone. Well, I really appreciate you all coming on today, and we'll make this available recording in the future and send it out to everyone on here, and really appreciate everybody chiming in and continue to move this ball forward. We're dedicated and are going to make a difference, and people will start listening sooner than later. I am very confident about that. It all takes everyone here and everybody else spreading the word to continue to drive this forward and move this ball. So really appreciate it. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. And thanks everyone for coming.
All right.
Okay, thank
Thanks a
you.
Thanks,
lot.
everyone.
Bye, thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.